Hey guys, what's up? Jim here, bringing you another voice tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at Call Manager in a BE6K small. What we're doing is what I call my base configuration on Call Manager and Unity connections. Instead of going into prime provisioning and doing the getting started wizard, what I choose to do is set up all my standards that I use for partitions, calling search spaces, the works, and set that up on Call Manager and Unity prior to going into Prime, and then I sync up so that way after the synchronization, Prime has all of my partitions, all of my calling search spaces, and the like. Instead of doing that, when you first get the BE6K small and you get everything started up, which we have previous videos on how to access and start up all of that. Once you get into this VMs and vSphere and CIMC module, you could go right in and start up the pre-configured virtual machines, run through and put in your initial config that's left to do on those, and then get right into Prime and do the getting started wizard and sync right up and get started with that. That's perfectly fine. This is just an alternative for if you're wanting to change the IP scheme, host names, and all that stuff in all of your virtual machines. So the way we're doing it today is we're going to hop into Call Manager and get started on what I call my base config. So I'm just going to get my face out of the way, and we'll get right into Call Manager. You can see, there's not licensing or anything on this yet. I choose to do licensing after I get almost everything up and running. In case something goes wrong during my configuration, I don't have to rehost the licenses. So I do that in the end. I know a lot of people go ahead and throw the licensing on right up front. But the only thing I have done is I've uploaded a file for route filters that we'll use later. So let's just dig right in. We're going to go in and change some parameters and some config here. I'm going to use an IP address because in my environment I'm not using DNS. So we're going to just put the host name down here, and we're going to use the IP address as the hostname IP address for the server. Save that out. Going on down the line, we can see that we have our group. You can rename this if you so choose. That's fine with me. And we're going to go ahead and enable auto registration. Can't be the same here. But anyway, we need to enable auto registration so that after we go through all of our Prime configuration, when phones initially register, they can grab a directory number. So we'll go ahead and change this. In our environment, we're going to be 3 digits. And for right now, we're going to go ahead and use just the standard universal templates here. We could go and change those later. And I went ahead and hit apply config. It popped up on my other screen. We can look at the groups. In this case, we don't have a subscriber. It's just going to be one Call Manager server. We're going to go ahead and change the name of this. Group. And apply that. And once again, this screen's just popping up over here. And we'll continue on down the line. That's just our server and our groups. While we're here, before we move on down, we're not gonna have a subscriber, but we're gonna have IM and present server. So it's pretty much the same as if you were going to add a subscriber, except we're going to add the IM and presence from the drop down, and we're going to put in its pertinent information here, and the domain, which we're just going to call that for right now. And this host name, I'll put it in the description. And you can put in IP version 6 addresses here as well if you need be. So we'll go on down to our date time group. I always start with the system tab and work myself down. We want to make sure this is in the format we want. And I'm going to go up to this guy. Moving on down the line, we'll go down to our region. Oops. Our region information. And we'll add a new. And set up any defaults that we need. And if you had multiple locations, you'd want to set up one for each location. This particular build is very simple, one location design. But we are going to have, in case of future builds, we'll go ahead and have the media that always needs to be 64K, in my opinion. We'll go down to our location. We'll add our location. Just to have our names in here in case we have to do any reservations or anything like that in the future. And let's see, we need a SRST gateway. Have that in there just in case. And we can also go through and create our media resource group and our group list for all of our media resources, such as Conference Bridge and all this stuff. What I'm going to do is change the device pool once we set it to be our main device pool. I don't like keeping things on the default. We'll go ahead and create our first device pool. Select our group that we've already configured and any other pertinent information. Save that guy out. So now we have our main. And what I do for my base config is I also have one grabber. even though a lot of the settings are going to be the same in this case, in case for future build outs, upgrades, whatever, I like to have separation there in case changes need to be made between the regular phones and the Jabber devices. I also like to have my own Unity device pool for the same reasons. Be able to segregate changes out in case you need to have specific call paths for the Unity ports and whatnot. And we'll add in the media resource group list shortly. All right. Let's also go ahead for this video and we'll do partitions, the standard that I like to use. So here we will basically have a partition. If you had multiple locations, you would filter out those here as well for your different partitions. In this case, we just have our main DN partition that we're going to have. We're going to have an emergency partition. We're going to have our auto provision. Let's just say auto for the auto provisioning that comes later on. We're going to have a Unity partition. I like to do an internal to put things like call parks, anything extra that needs to go into an internal partition. I'm going to have a restricted. This is going to be used for segregating call flow and to help prevent things like malicious calls. So we don't need a separate one for Jabber, because that will be, the actual director numbers will be a part of the main DN there. But let's do an inbound partition for calls coming in through our gateway, so that could be segregated and help with call flow security. I believe that's the standards. You know, we would have a lot more here if we had multiple locations. So now we'll just get into our outbound call flow. Let's just do service partition. We'll have all of our PSTN. These will be separated out later in the call flow design. So let's have our local, our long distance, our toll free, and international if we need it. So that service for anything like 411, any of the 11 services besides 911, international, long distance, local, toll free. Okay. So that should do us on our partitions. Now we could go over and go to our calling search spaces, and these will be for our quote-unquote access list type security that's in Call Manager. And let's just add some new ones here. We're going to have our main calling search space. And this is an ordered list, so let's have our emergency right off the bat. Anything going internal into our main DN. Let's actually reverse that. And we'll have Unity. And then we'll have, we don't want to include inbound. We don't want to include our restricted. So let's do our PSTN now. Local, long distance, toll free, and if we were going to do international or service calls, we could add those here. I'm just including this in case it needs to be there in the future. And I'll actually go ahead and include the international to this calling list for right now. So we add what we need for each of our calling search spaces. If we were going to have CCX or anything like that, we would include that. And of course, a calling search space for any location if you had multiple locations. Let's go ahead and do our inbound call flow. And that one's easy. Let's also just have an internal. Actually, I don't want to name it internal. Let's use a Unity. Internal. So this is for anything internal. Okay, that's good. Let's have one for our line. And this is where malicious call security comes in. And we're only going to be allowing the line to go to our restricted. And we'll create some translation patterns that will point things to a bank of numbers that I've gotten in the route filter. So basically anything, well, I'm not sure if you know or not, but basically a line calling search space trumps a device calling search space. So at the line level, it's where the ordered list starts. And we're going to have translation patterns that have route filters that have specific known numbers that are used for malicious calls. You can find that out with a web search to IANA and things like that, and populate your own route lists. And then if that passes, the first level passes, if a call goes off hook, tries to call, and the number is not included in the route list, then it will go back onto the device calling search space, which is the one I created earlier, this main calling search space here, which has the PSTN partition, so it will be able to get outbound. So that's how I handle a little bit of call flow security there. So we have our internal, let's do Jabber, because as I said earlier, I like to segregate those. Even though it's pretty much going to have the same thing as our main calling search space. I still like to have that, so if this does need to change, we already have it. We don't have to go trying to configure this on the fly. So that's rather nice. So we have our line, we have our Jabber, we have our internal, we have our, let's just go take a look. We have our inbound calls. So I believe that just about covers it. Well, we need one more. Let's do a call forward all. So that we can have this particular calling search space on our lines so that they can set up a call forward on their phones if your organization so chooses. So we'll basically have this to be able to call just about everywhere. And this can be changed depending on your organization's security policies for calls, because you may not want to have long distance allowed here, and definitely probably not toll-free or international on a call forward. So in this case, I'm leaving it off. All right, so there's our calling search spaces and our partitions. We can add more, because in this case we have an internal. We could also add a unity calling search space to segregate out even more if so choose. And we'll just go ahead and have it here just for the fun of it. And just so the order of this hits, depending on what you need. Alright, so now that we have our calling search spaces, our partitions, and an ordered list, we're going to go ahead and go over, let's do our, I'll actually pause this, and offline we'll create our media resource group list so we can update the device pool. But basically we're just going to go through and create our group, adding in what we need and adding it to the list. So I'll be right back with that. Alright, so I'll return here. Basically, I went down through all these media resources and I added our device pool and location, saved and applied. You can see that they're currently still not registered because we still have to do a few things here before we'll see these things register locally. And then I just went down and created a media resource group list. So now we could just go over to our device pools, view the ones we have, and we can go in here and set, so we have our media groups here on our device pools. So that is that. So we have our device pools, we have most of our basic config over here for regions and locations. We have our calling search spaces and partitions lined out. Now, obviously this is just very high level, what I call my base config. Obviously can go into great more detail in setting up time periods and whatnot. But there's a few other things we need to do for what I call my base config. And you go over here to our enterprise parameters and run down here, because we're not doing DNS, we actually need to set this to be an IP address instead of the host name, to make sure that all of our services and phone authentications and all that good stuff can connect properly in the future access in the call manager. And of course, if you're doing the paging server that comes with the B6K and the authentication URL, you'll be changing it to the Informacast URL here anyway. But in this case, we're going to change it to the IP address. And we'll do a quick copy and paste into each one of these, so there is no confusion later on. And after this, we'll go through and actually activate all of our services. So we'll save and apply this. And now, before we do much else, go over to our serviceability tab. And do our service activation on our server here, so that we can add our subscribers, so we do start seeing things working correctly and talking to each other as we turn up all of our servers. In this case, I'm just going to check all. Obviously, if you have a publisher and subscriber, you can change which services are on which server. Since we only have the one in this environment, just go ahead and get them all running, so I'll be back when that finishes. Alright, so all of our services are now activated. So we can pop back to our main administration view. And one thing to check just quickly, as you can see that these are now registered, so we know the services are active. And one other calling search space I forgot to do was for our auto provisioning, so we'll just add that. And this is for some security later, so that when a device does go in, it can only get to things that you allow when it auto registers, when someone just plugs it into your network. All right, so that's the very, very basics. We're going to dig a little bit deeper here and actually go through and set up our voicemail. And we can also set up our Jabber basics, and that will complete our call manager. What I like to call my base config is having the Unity voicemail wizard and the synchronization done between call manager and Unity, and all the user settings ready for the UC services and service profile that will connect to Jabber, and then the user profiles that we use for auto provisioning. And here's the standard one where you can set your templates for your devices separately. So you can set that all up, and that will be the basic config. So not to bore you to tears, I'm not going to show you each one of these as I do it, just explaining to have the voicemail configured and all the Jabber settings. So I'm going to take care of some of that, and I'll be right back with you and share with you along the way after it's completed. Okay, we're back after some configuration has been done here. We'll go through and look at what's been done. Down in the user settings, in the UC service section, you can see I've gone through and configured some services for voicemail, mail store, CTI, IM, and presence. If you had Active Directory enabled in your environment, you'd add it here as well. This is for the Jabber services. Just to take a peek at one, you go through and you configure all these. Also, down in the service profile, I've configured the service profile pointing to each one of the services that I just configured. One thing to note is the credential source for voicemail. Most of the time you want it pointed to the IM and presence. If you do not set on the actual Jabber client itself, if you have a soft phone or the Jabber talk client, you'd go in the options menu and select, and you would enter your voicemail credentials there. In this case, we're going to do a temporary username and password that matches across the board for their initial access. So I'm going to point it to the IM and presence. Also, access control group created a specific one down here with the roles that are needed for a standard user and for the phone models this particular client is getting. So that's been done. And the roles already be done. While we're here, we're going to go ahead and update the default credential policy. For Jabber, it's a good idea to already have this unchecked and does not expire, so that when they first log into Jabber or other features, it's not going to cause issues. So we'll do that for the end user and the PIN. Also, I have imported my route filters that I had previously uploaded to the server. You can't actually do the import until all the services are active, which we have already done previously. So we have our credential policy set, we have our access control group set. we have our UC services and our service profile already up and configured and ready to go for Jabber. Also over here in voicemail, I've configured my message waiting numbers and my voicemail pilot, default, and my profile here. I also went ahead while I was in here and went direct to voicemail profile. Basically, it has a mask on it to set the extension length here, and a little bit extra from a basic config. But while we're here, I also went over and created a directory number with the star XXX pattern. So if you want to send, these users will be able to hit star and a 3-digit extension and send a call directly to voicemail. What I've also done is set up a new universal device template with the settings for the devices in this environment, so that it will be ready for auto provisioning later. So basically, you just go down through these and set up things that we've already configured earlier for the device pool, the calling search spaces, any other phone settings. For example, I've already done the soft key template. I've created a specific one, and that is under device settings, and soft key template, and that you could just specifically set the soft keys that will be available for these phones, and I've set it here in my template, and any other. And I've also set up some specifics here that I want showing on the line as they come in and auto provisioned. So go through there and set that up as needed. Along with that, the universal line template, I've created another specific one for this client, setting up all the options and route partitions, calling search space. As you can see, this is going through the line, which we'll get into the call flow video that will be next. Getting into just all the line settings, all the call forward settings that you might need. Going to voicemail. Let's set this to call forward all, so that that's there. We don't have to go and hit it for every device later. So those are our templates that are set up. We can now go down to our user profile, and we can create a specific one. Instead of using the factory default, we may need to use that one later. We'll make this one default, and we'll select this device template. We'll go ahead and select it for each one of these, even though in this case we're not going to have much need for these two. And we'll set up our line template. We'll allow the users to provision their own phones, and we'll save that. We can limit it down to, for security reasons, we limit this down. Once the end user has this many phones, it won't allow them to provision anymore. We'll leave the defaults in this case. So now we're ready for Jabber, pretty much with our UC services, our service profile. Also, another thing I have done offline is I went down to our phone services, and I created an extension mobility service for this environment, and I enabled that on our universal device template down here in the service configuration. No, there it is, service subscription, and I've added the extension mobility there, so we'll be ready to rock and roll. Also, while we're here, in the auto registration template that I initially configured for auto provisioning on the device pool, I have set up for it to be in the auto provisioning calling search space that I set earlier. And along with that, the sample that came with it that I also set in the device pool, I set its route partition to be in the auto and the line calling search space just for some added security. So that way when these lines register automatically when they're connected to the network and get the correct DHCP information, they'll register with the directory number and the range I set in the auto partition. Along with that, I've set a CTI route point that is also in the same calling search space and partition with a directory number of 180. So basically when a phone registers, they'll be able to dial the extension 180 to be able to auto provision their phone for their correct directory number later when we get everything finished. And to finalize that part of it, we can go down to this self-provisioning. We can require authentication. If need be, we can use users via their password and PIN. In this case, we're not going to require it because my technicians will be entering this as they stage the phones. So there's no point in doing that in this case. We'll go ahead and select English. Oh, that is selected, my bad. And we'll do the auto CTI route point that I created earlier. Oh, and I forgot to do the application user, so we'll go back and do that super quick. All right, so here we go. I've provisioned a application user real fast for this specific case and put the standard CTI enabled down here as a permissions access. So now we can hop back over here to self-provisioning. Try this again. Alright, so I had another window up and it caused that initial area there, but just save that and it shows that you dial 180 from the phone to auto provision. So we're all ready to rock and roll with that. We have most of our basic configuration up. Now for the call manager, we have our device pools, our call manager groups, date, time, regions, locations. We also have our calling search spaces and partitions. We have most of our user settings set up with Jabber configurations, user profile configurations, and our auto provisioning templates and directory numbers, and all that is set up and ready to go. We also have our extension mobility service and our standard soft key and our standard end user access control group set up. So, and we also have some preliminary setup for voicemail. We're going to hop over to our voicemail server. And I don't have any certificates installed on these, so it's given an initial warning there. Get logged into Unity. And there we go. We also see that there's no licensing installed as of yet. So basic config for Unity, let's first of all hop down to our authentication rules. And we're going to change, in my case, I'm going to make some changes. Let's see, minimum length in my case. This is for voicemail, so I'll do 4. We're only store 1, and we're not going to do trivial. Obviously, in this test environment, I don't need secure passwords. So to make it easier for our demos, we're going to change some of this. I'm going to make this down to 5. There we are. So now we can go back up. We can configure our class of service for our voicemail users. And this is going to be so that when we add this class of service into our templates and users are provisioned in here, all this will be set as users come in. We don't have to do it per user later. We'll allow voice recognition. We won't be integrated with Exchange in this case. We'll leave that off. We don't have any transcription services. So that's good. We'll allow them need to enable that so they can get in the web. All right. So very basic there. And on our user template, voicemail user template, we'll make sure it's set for self-enrollment. And we're going to go up and edit our password settings. For our PIN, we want to make sure that they need to change it upon next sign in, because we're just going to do a temporary one, in both cases for web and voicemail. And we'll go ahead and change those so that we know exactly what they are and what to give the user. So the actual voicemail PIN will set within the template. We're in the template. We're not in any user here. And we'll change the web. Okay. All right, so now that we have that set, we're not going to worry about any call handling or anything like that at this point. We're going to roll on down and get our phone integration with Call Manager rolling. So we'll get into this settings. We'll set up our server with the username and password it needs to communicate with. And add in our server itself. Then actually run a test on that. Oh, that's set up for. And there's our test, went successfully. Now we can go over and add our port group. You can do that here or at port group down here under the integration tab. So we're going to do SCCP in this case. Our prefix is going to be our on is 501, off is 502, our IP address of Call Manager. Now, we need to remember this for later when we're doing our wizard in Call Manager. But for now, we'll go ahead and add our ports. We're going to do 24. And we're going to go ahead and allow all the port behaviors in this case. So while those are spinning and adding the ports, we're going to move up back over to Call Manager and go to our voicemail port wizard. Now we need to remember our name from earlier. And we're doing 24 ports. Add our descriptions in here, our device pool, and we actually created a Unity device pool, our call search space, and our location. And in this case, we're going to do non-secure voicemail ports. We're going to tell our beginning directory number and which partitions they go into. Click on next. And here you could choose, if you already have a line group set up, you can configure it in there. In this case, we're going to add to a brand new line group. So we'll set that line group name here. And there we are. Let's make sure Unity is all finished over here. And we have our 24 ports set up. Click on one of those. You can see there's our SCCP, or skinny device name. And we'll go ahead and finish this and let that wizard run. And we'll return as soon as that wizard finishes. Oh, yeah, it was quicker than me. So there we go. Our line group and our ports are there, which we can go take a look at. And our line group settings are over here. So all we would need to do now, because our ports are in this line group, is go over and create a hunt list for voicemail. Select our Call Manager group. Enable this for voicemail usage. Add in our line group that was created from the wizard. And add our hunt palette, which is going to be the same as the voicemail palette. And select our hunt list that we just created. We can give it some description here. Make sure that it's in the Unity partition and save that. Alright, so now we need to go back over and finalize our base config here, because we're not getting any call flow with the auto attendant or directory handlers or any of the handlers at this point in time. What we do need to do to configure, to finalize, if I could speak, is do the same thing like we did on Call Manager. Go over to our serviceability, and we're going to activate all the services. As soon as it goes. So we'll check this and activate the services on our Unity box, and I'll be back when it finishes. Alright, there we are. It is finished up its service activation. Let's just pop back over here to Call Manager. Make sure that some time has lapsed from adding this and activating the services. Let's make sure that those voicemail ports are actually registered. There we go. So they are all registered up and ready to go, and that is what I call the base config for Call Manager Unity, and a little bit of presence in there actually as well with getting the users up and running. This is all getting ready for prime provisioning. So there we have it. We have our base configuration all set up and ready to go. In the next video, we'll take a look at call flow and some configuration to get ready for our outbound and inbound call paths and security along with that. And from there, we'll move into our prime provisioning and getting our one other thing that has to be done is I set up my server here ready for IM and presence. We actually have to get that virtual machine up. But as I said, we'll move on to some call flow next. So please remember to subscribe and share. Thank you much.